What's up, Kiran? How you doing, man?
Good.
Good to
How are
see you.
you?
It's been a few days, man. Guys, I am dressed up not so much for you. I just came back from church. That's why I'm rocking the bow tie. And yes, I do tie my own bow ties, Kiran.
Yes.
It took many YouTube videos learning how to do this. So while we were sitting down, we're brand new to this, and we're trying to come up with some ideas for videos. You put together a really great list, but we always come together and we have like a moment where we're like, okay, what are we going to talk about, right? So what was the idea that came to mind today while we're sitting here at the table?
The first thing that came to mind is where is my jacket?
Yeah.
Because I didn't know you were going to raise the bar
Yeah.
so high.
Don't worry, next week I'll be back to a regular t-shirt, man. You'll be fine.
So before we start on the topic, couple of things that I want to really ask you about.
Yeah.
What is this grenade here?
Oh, dude, this grenade, this is the Canon RF 85 lens for you photographers out there. This is a jewel-worthy lens. This thing is amazing. By far the sharpest portrait lens that I've ever used, and I am so excited to have this in my arsenal. So
That's great.
All right,
So
thanks, man.
how much would it cost?
Let's just say that you could buy a cheap car for the cost of this lens. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Now, no wonder we know you were decisive in deciding to buy high-end equipment for
Yes.
your business.
Right.
So whenever we try to decide, as a businessman, I know that there are so many decision points. How did you make up your mind to make a huge investment on a lens? Because I can guarantee you that customers probably don't know what kind of lens you are
Yeah.
using to take a picture. You probably can use some other lens alternative or a shortcut. So
Yeah.
what was your train of thought?
Dude, that was a really good point because, well, I'm sure this is the case in your business too. There are many things that you do behind the scenes that your client doesn't care that you use an X software or this. They just want the result at the end of the day, right? But you know the difference that software or equipment makes to your process and how it can elevate it. And so with that lens, I made a rule for myself in my business that I would never purchase equipment until my client work demanded it. So once my client work got to the point where I was getting published in magazines, a few billboards, large format print runs for advertisements, then I realized, okay, my equipment has to match the quality that these people are asking for. And then the second thing I decided was, I'm going to make sure that when I buy something for my business, I never buy it on credit. My business, pay cash for everything,
and get it done.
My business, I never want to be in debt for equipment that I'm buying, because if I'm not able to earn the money ahead of time to buy that thing, maybe I shouldn't buy it, right? Maybe my client work isn't where it needs to be, and maybe I can be just fine with something cheaper. So paying cash for everything has really helped out as far as that goes.
What I like is the fact that you have created boundaries so that your decision can be simpler. If you don't have any boundaries set for your business or for your own personal business, then if you say, oh, I can do this, I can do that, then it's not going to be a business anymore. It's just going to be an emotional thing. Like you look at a lens like that, you probably fall in love with the lens, and then you make an impulsive choice to just go buy it. So
then you look at your bank account and then you cry.
Then you cry, and then you might not even use it, because when you look at the amount of returns that people have, there was a survey to figure out how much of household items that people are not using, that they intend to return, that they bought impulsively.
What was the percentage?
So every household has an average in the entire US about $4,500 in their home of stuff that they never opened, never used, never decided. So the point being, the step number one for anybody to be decisive is they need to create their own boundaries. The boundary, either it's budget or a criteria of a particular thing for you to make a decision on it. So unless you have the boundaries, there is nothing really. Like how Donald Trump says, unless we have a border, there is no country, right? It's like that. We need to have a boundary. Okay, sorry other guys who don't follow Trump, but there are some good one-liners that Trump really struck me. That I mean, what he said is true, right? Unless you have a border, there is no country. Unless you have a boundary, there is no business.
Right. Well, it's the same with your home, right? Unless you have walls, you don't have a house. You just living on the street.
You can go on. Unless there is a roof, there is no home.
So when it comes to becoming decisive, and that's really the point of this video, is we want to talk about becoming decisive as a business owner. So Kiran, you've made a lot of decisions, and you keep making decisions every single day. What is it? Did you have a moment where you were indecisive and then you learn to be decisive, or were you always like just decisive in every decision you ever made?
uh, just as my personality is
Yeah.
that I want to decide and then move on.
Okay,
Sometimes
yeah.
I make very poor choices, but still
But you're moving forward. The momentum.
I need to have the decision made to go to the next step. If I make a decision, then the power of the made up mind, right? I may make up my mind very quickly,
Right.
and then I move forward regardless of the consequences, or regardless of, I don't have any regrets with the decisions that I make.
Right.
Once I make the decision, I keep moving forward, and I get more pleasure in making the decision than trying to drag it out.
Dude, I love that, and I think you and I share that personality trait. What do you think is a benefit to you? Like, because some people, they have so much anxiety about making a choice, even if it's a small one for their business, right? And sometimes some of the decisions that some of you may be thinking about is to even start the business, right? You may have this great idea that you really love, but you're just filled with anxiety about not doing it. But once you make that choice, what are some of the benefits that you found for yourself that you're like, that have manifested themselves in your business, in your life?
So it's interesting you said anxiety. The reason to make the decision sooner if you are more anxious, because anxiety is going to eat us alive. For me, I hate to be anxious. Like when I go to bed,
right.
I want to make sure all my decisions are made. That way, I wake up in the
That's
morning
smart.
with a clear mind, knowing exactly what we want to
Right.
do. So if you're anxious, because being in real estate, I've seen many families very close to their decision point of deciding between 2 or 3 homes that they like.
Right. Okay.
It's just like finding a spouse. There could always be a better one out there, but you have a spouse in front of you. You better make up your mind. There is always shortcomings on any choice that you make.
Right.
So just like that, even in homes, there is always a shortcoming, but people freeze. And the jam lock is even worse if you have multiple decision makers.
Analysis paralysis.
Analysis is paralyzing. Not only that, if there are 2 decision makers and if either of them are not decisive, if one of them doesn't take a lead,
Right.
then there is a complete log jam. So log jam of thoughts, log jam of analysis, and then the pessimistic mind comes
Right.
alive.
Right.
Also, it's like when I say I'm very decisive, it doesn't mean I'm decisive all the time, right? Because mood swings are there, morning, evening, night. But
Are you more of a morning guy, or more of an evening guy?
totally morning, I have to be up by 4
Exact
o'clock.
opposite. Really? I'm going to bed by 4. I went to bed at 3:30 last night, man.
Oh my God! No, I have to be up by 4 because after 4:30 I can't even sleep. So that's my problem.
Oh, got you. Yeah, that's good.
So coming back to the morning or evening, right? My decision is I need to make all my decisions the night before so that I can go to bed with a clear plan of action for the
I like
day.
that. So you're actually your antidote for the anxiety is to make the decision so you can just get on with it, right?
Get on with it.
Because you're right, that anxiety comes from the anticipation of what if something goes wrong. Well, once you make the choice, now you just have to deal with the consequences that go with it, and you can take it one step at a time, right?
Yes, and another lesson that I learned just watching so many couples closely as to how they are trying to make a decision,
Right.
and the longer you take to make the choice, the worse the actual choice is going to be. The reason for that is it actually goes downhill from there. Let's say
let's
you
go
have
to
to decide
example.
on the higher house,
Okay.
right? You have 3 homes to decide. All the 3 are good. They meet your basic criteria, whatever you chose.
Okay.
In the first meeting, they go through. Okay, these are the things that I want. All the 3 meet their criteria. All the 3 are good. First, the wife and husband, they are unable to make up their mind.
Okay.
Then they bring in their friends to see the homes and then give them the verdict.
All right, so they're
Then
bringing more people
obviously-
into the decision.
They bring more people into the decision, and everybody they say free advice is easy,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So everybody gives their own free advice of pros and cons of everything, and that's going to really cause a commotion on the decision making process. So the longer you drag it out, the more people that you bring it in, all the negatives and positives are more pronounced.
That's true.
That it will make it even more difficult for you to make a choice. So the second tip I have for people is, after you define the criteria, what your criteria is, then you have to just not think through it for the next 3 to 5 years, because life is very short, give it or not. And 5 years really changes everything.
Yeah, it does.
Remember 5 years ago where we were and where we are right now, and
You-
next 5 years could be totally different.
You're totally right. I mean, there's no way that I would have thought I'd be sitting here with you today doing this 5 years ago, right?
I
For
never
example.
thought I'll be sitting with Shay to do this also. But talking about this, can you talk about this tree that you got here?
Oh,
Shay?
well, so you brought this piece of artwork in, and we both kind of looked at it, and I don't know, culturally, for me, it represents the tree of life, and with my religious background. Do you guys have a version of that? I don't know what your background religiously is. Do you guys have a version of the tree of life, or?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I'm Hindu,
Yeah.
and we worship everything.
Right. Okay.
Everything is God. Like even if there is a book, we just think it's God. So
yeah.
tree, we have many trees that we worship. So it's a tree of life.
Tree of life is what
Tree
that
of
represents
life.
for me. Yeah.
Okay.
As LDS. Yeah.
So you are pretty decisive in naming it,
Right.
So that is what we want. As soon as you see it, your mind actually triggered you a few things from your past experiences,
Right.
and your background, your culture, your decisive. So being decisive also comes from that lot of background as to what your previous experiences
That's
are.
true.
And if you are not experienced with a certain thing, we tend to try to get advice from other people, and that is what happens where the confusion is.
Well, let's take somebody who maybe struggles to make decisions for themselves, right? What are some things that they can do to learn how to become more decisive? Because I think that's probably the biggest issue that people that have, those who are being decisive, like they already know, like, hey, I'm gonna go. I already know I'm gonna, I'm not gonna bat 1,000, but that's okay. I'm gonna figure it out. They're comfortable in their skill set and their network of people around them. That hey, if they make a mistake, they're gonna recover from it, right? That's not a big issue for them. But a lot of people, especially like in my sphere of influence, they do struggle with indecisiveness. So what are some things that they can do outside of what you just outlined to help overcome that and become more decisive in their choices?
I feel like people who are indecisive, they overestimate or overrate the consequences impact on
that's
how
huge, yeah.
the life is going to be. So for them, I think that the advice that I have on that is we have to really look at the past life decisions that we've made, big or small, or something at the same scale, or if something that their friends or parents made,
Right.
and then just think of, okay, what if they made the other choice? You might tend to realize that the consequences might not be as bad as that, because
Man.
there is rarely few of us who get to make life and death choices unless you are a surgeon operating on somebody.
Right.
Most of it is silly, I mean, financial decisions or something that we think the consequences are really as elaborate that we might make of it.
Right. Well, you tapped into something else too. Like, I think that's really important. And the thing that you just reminded me of is not every decision that we make. In fact, the vast majority of decisions that you're going to make in a day, a week, even a month, aren't really consequential in the
Right.
big scheme of things. Like, I've heard of people like praying about what color of fence to paint their house. I'm like, dude, Heavenly Father doesn't care what color of fence. He's got bigger things to worry about
yes.
than the color of your fence. Just
Yes.
make a decision and do it. And I think understanding that, hey, once you make a decision, oftentimes the consequences aren't as big as maybe you assumed they would be. But in the same breath, most of the decisions that we have to make on a day-to-day basis, even as entrepreneurs with our business, are super small. They're not super consequential. There's only going to be a few times when those things come up. But if you get into a habit of making those small choices, when the big ones come, you're more prepared for them, I feel like. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, not only that, I think that the last phase of this decision making is not regretting the choices that you already made, right?
No, it's huge,
So once you are decisive, okay, you made this choice, then don't try to undo the decision if it is too far beyond wherein you can undo it. So trying to undo it or repair a past decision
Right.
is difficult. I mean, think about how many people are living in bad relationships, not able to make up their mind to walk away. Like people really go through so much of mental stress going through bad relationships. We see that all the time
Right.
in the news and everywhere, wherein they talk about, they wish they did this long time ago.
Right, right.
It happens all the time. It's very easy to say than actually do it. And the only way you can do it is if you can be super intentional about it. And if you are not intentional about it, then unintentionally you'll end up suffering through the decision taking and also post decision making process.
That's so true, man. You know, that sometimes we get really married to the decisions that we've made in the past too.
Yeah.
And realizing that, hey, it's okay to change your mind, right? Let's look at it from like a business perspective. Let's say that you've made a decision with something that you feel is really important to your business. And at the time, maybe it was, a few years go down the road, and the importance of that starts to wane. Sometimes we get married to that. We're like, no, it's got to be this way. I can't change this thing because it's part of my... No, man, you're the entrepreneur. You're the one who's making the decisions. As George Bush says, I'm the decider, right? I think he said that once when the Bushisms. You can basically make any choice you want for your business at any point in time. And being able to uncouple yourself from past decisions that might be slowing you down is really, really important. And I think can give you freedom to say, hey, it's okay for me to change my mind or want to do something a little different. And if that starts to work for your business, great. And if it doesn't, you can change your mind again and unroll it and do something different with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We as decision makers, not just in businesses, even in personal life, it's the same thing. You have to keep making choices multiple times during the day.
Yeah.
And the best thing that happens at that moment is making a decision. The worst thing that happens is you deferring the decision. That's going to just keep on adding to the baggage of things that you have to do.
Who is it that said that if you don't make a choice for yourself, someone else will do it for you?
Oh, that's
right?
a good
Or
one.
life will decide for you.
If you don't make up your mind, somebody else will decide it for you.
Let's take the entrepreneur, or let's take the wannapreneur, right? We've all been there before. We want to be an entrepreneur, but we're not yet. And let's say that you're waiting for the perfect time. You want to have the perfect amount of money, the perfect situation, right? Does that ever happen? Does the perfect time ever happen? It never happens. So you deciding to say, I'm going to wait for the perfect time, guess what? Life is going to tell you there is no perfect time. So guess what? You're never going to get that opportunity to make that decision.
Bam.
Right?
Yeah. Good one, Shane.
So you really have to say, you know what? I'm going to take control of the decisions that I'm making in my own life. And things might not be perfect right now, but what is the first step that I can do? And if it looks like a big project that you're trying to undertake, what's always been helpful for me is saying, can I break this up into some smaller steps? And say, okay, what's that first step look like? Let me just do that. And then once I accomplish that, I'm like, okay, cool, my vista's a little bit higher now. I can see a little bit more.
Yeah.
And maybe what I thought was a path and a trajectory, I realized, no, I got a couple other options that I didn't even consider or weren't aware of before. And then I make that next decision, and that opens up a few more pathways. And oftentimes I'll find that where I started and where I wanted to end up is different than where I started and where I actually ended up, because these other new vistas opened up as I'm making these choices.
It's the same thing, right? They say, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. So you have to decide to first eat an elephant. So that's a big decision that you make, that I want to eat this elephant. Then you have to just go one step at a time, and each bite is a decision again. That do you want to continue to eat the elephant, or you want to back out of this project? Right. The only man who can never make a mistake is the one who never does anything.